this is right after the 2004 election, which was obviously a really devastating election result for Democrats. And it was sort of a devastating election result for me.
George Bush's victory comes in the midst of lousy dispatches from the war front and lousy economic news. It suggests Republican strategists have tapped into some profoundly conservative American instincts, and that the mountain for Democrats to climb just got a lot bigger.
I don't like to wallow, and I don't like other people to wallow. After this big reversal, I was trying to get people's footing of sort of like, there's still another day and there's still, kind of more things. So in light of that, there had been this investigation of Tom DeLay down in Texas, and he had, or I guess he was about to be indicted. At this point, Tom DeLay basically ran the House caucus he was the majority leader, but the speaker is the leader of the caucus, but he was really the leader behind the scenes calling the shots. And he was going to be indicted, and the Republican caucus had a rule: you can't be majority leader if you're under indictment, right? Pretty logical rule to have. In any case, he wanted to change that rule because he knew he was about to be indicted. So he kind of had his caucus change the rule to allow their leader to be under indictment. Now, this is a hard vote, right? I mean, how do you justify that, right? So what they did is they did it as a roll call vote in a caucus meeting. So there's no record, right? Or at least it's not public. And I think, in fact, there's like literally no record, just like me, hi, So I saw this, and one of the things I have always thought I'm decent at are seeing the things that kind of like, man, you're not gonna be able to go public with that. That's not something you're gonna be able to justify. So I, kind of coined it as the delay rule, and said people and a few people had come out, a few members of the caucus come out and said, hey, I voted against it. This is bullshit. So you put those people down. And I said, look, call your congressman. It's not a vote, but they can tell you how they voted. And it was sort of clear to me, no one's going to want to own this, right? And so people started writing in, and sort of one of the kind of fun parts of that is that people make excuses and they refuse to, I don't want to tell you how I voted and stuff. And it's just, I love those kind of things. I love shining a light on things that are indefensible, right? Eventually, God, I'm trying to remember. I don't even remember exactly how that all played out. But we had people all around the country calling the office of the representative. How'd you vote? And sort of then they would tell me, it's like, well, this person said there was a voice vote, so it's not recorded. And then I pointed out, that doesn't mean you can't tell me how you vote. Just working through all this stuff. So, the sort of the reader input stuff had been something that was pretty central to the site's function and existence from the start, but that was one of the first times that I did something kind of like that. I got a feel for it and the possibilities of it. You're in this period where Bush is starting to construct his second administration. And one of the big things is, there was a book by Tom Edsall then. It was basically, permanent Republican majority. There was this idea that with their advantage in campaign money, with gerrymandering, with all these different kind of things, that the Republicans were just going to be in power forever. And things change quickly. There's always something to remember in politics. But you could see it because they started getting very cocky. The delay rule was sort of an example of that. Bush tried to basically, because Rudy Giuliani asked him, tried to make Bernard Kerik head of DHS, which again, shocking, right? A total crook. And he was eventually, him being vetted for that position, publicly vetted for that position, led to scandals that eventually sent him to prison. In any way, they're sort of flush with victory and getting cocky. And the big part of that is that Bush decides he is going to privatize Social Security. He's going to use his, political capital to do this. And this was, to me, this is one of these cornerstone things that makes the federal government a positive, solidaristic factor in American life, right? This is like taking an axe to the foundation of the modern state. So this is a fight worth throwing everything into. It was also clear to me, there were a lot of people saying, Democrats, well, what's their proposal going to be? What's the compromise going to be? And it was very clear to me that the only way to, and again, the Republicans had the presidency, they had the Senate, they had the House. The Democrats really couldn't do anything. They were powerless. So all this is coming together. And again, I see myself as having a good eye for what's not going to be defensible, right? And kind of like is sort of zero in, kind of like write that little, the kind of the, sort of like Smaug in The Hobbit, where he has that one place where he has, doesn't have a scale, the sort of the chink in his armor. So, and I had just kind of coming off this delay rule thing where I kind of like feel like, all right, flex these muscles that not the site has, the community has, right? The TPM community has. And so I started basically trying to find the Republicans who were not on board and the Democrats who were not willing to say, no, I'm a no vote. I'm not compromised, kind of like, no, we're not doing this. We're not going to meet you halfway. No. And the Democrats who were sort of, in wobbly were the faint-hearted faction, and the Republicans were the conscience caucus, right? And this went on for a few months, and I totally turned the site totally over to that. There was nothing else on the site besides this for months. All of legislative politics is about saying the caucus, because no one wants to have that light on them if they're the few people. And so the whole point of the exercise was basically finding out who those few people were, right? And sort of showing that maybe Bush wasn't going to be able to do this if he had to do it purely with Republican votes. And so what you would see is you had Republican members of Congress who at home in town halls were saying, oh, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that. I don't know if I can do that. And, pulling that out of the local paper where that got written up and sort of putting it in front of the national political conversation. Say, well, look, there's a lot of these guys who say they're not ready to do it. And the two things played off each other. The more Republicans weren't ready to sell it at home, the more Democrats were willing to say, no, just no. You want to do it? Great. You do it. 100%. And then that'll be what the 2006 election will be about. And vice versa. The more Democrats were saying, like, you will not get a single Democratic vote. This will not be bipartisan. This will be 100% the Republican thing. In any case, so that went on for, the first few months of 2005. It was probably one of the things I'm most proud of in my life, frankly.